Mist curled across the Danube like a ghost with nowhere left to go. It moved slowly, steadily, blanketing the black water in silence, drowning the reeds and the banks and the footprints left by those who had watched from the shore. The wind was light but cold, the kind that felt older than the skin it touched. It carried the scent of wet bark, burnt timber, and the iron tang of distant horses. Somewhere far downstream, a lone heron took flight, its wings slicing through fog like parchment torn by the weight of history. A torch hissed beside a Roman watchtower, its flame wavering in protest against the moisture-heavy air. Wax bled down its shaft like a slow wound. Beneath it, a boy stood with his hands stiff at his sides. His breastplate was too large, it slid slightly when he breathed. He had no beard, no scars, no stories. But he had eyes that did not blink, and breath that tried to disappear into the silence. His name was Marcus, and his bones already knew he was not ready. Behind him, inside the rough stone garrison, older men pretended to sleep, snoring through fear and wine. They had heard the stories, that the East breathed again, that shadows moved differently now, that the barbarians had changed. Not wild, not reckless. Just silent. And endless. Marcus had seen nothing. But he felt something. Something in the way the wind pressed against his ears, the way the birds did not sing. He reached for the torch with shaking fingers, trying to warm himself, but the fire gave no comfort. It only flickered lower, as though afraid. Then, hoofbeats. Soft, distant, irregular. Not a charge. A migration. He leaned forward, squinting into the mist. Shapes. Indistinct, at first. Riders, yes, but not the kind who wore polished armor or carried banners. They were lower to the saddle, as if molded to their beasts. Fur-lined cloaks swayed with each stride. Leather, bone, sinew. They moved with the patience of wolves, the hunger of winter. This was not an army. Not yet. This was a whisper of something that would soon scream. Among them rode a boy, younger than the rest, silent like the wind he rode with. His name was Munzuk. The second son of a lesser chief. He held no command, bore no markings. But his eyes did not look away. He watched the torchlight as if memorizing it. As if trying to understand a world lit by fire and fear. Around his neck hung a shard of polished jet, suspended on a strip of hide. It was carved with a symbol, not of language, but of memory. His mother had given it to him before she died, her breath shallow from the lung fever that took the weak and the kind. Tingri watches, she had whispered. The spirits live in stone. And then she was gone. Wrapped in wool, burned beneath stars. The jet was all that remained, the weight of her voice without the warmth. The boy touched it now, unconsciously, as the river drew closer. Behind him, carts groaned. Covered in hide, soaked with frost, they bore the bones of the steppes, smoked horse meat, dried milk, firestones, tools, and infants bundled in fur. Women walked beside oxen, their faces veiled against the wind. The smell of dung and boiled roots drifted up behind them. No songs, no chants. Just the rhythm of moving forward. They had left the flatlands weeks ago. Fleeing famine. Or chasing prophecy. No one agreed. But all followed. In the distance, the outline of the Roman watchtower grew sharper. It stood like a cracked tooth in the jaw of the riverbank. Old. Confident. Crumbling. Munzuk tilted his head. He had never seen a wall before. Not a real one. Not one meant to say, "You are not welcome." The elder beside him, a man with half an ear and 3 dead sons, spat into the grass. "They think it will keep us out," he muttered, as if to himself. "But the wind goes where it wants." The boy said nothing. But his hand tightened around the jet. The river was not wide. Nor deep. But it was guarded. The Romans had placed stones in it, stakes beneath the surface, traps meant for armies. But not for people like these. The riders dismounted, their boots crunching frost beneath them. Elders whispered. A fire was lit, its smoke rising in coils like prayers long forgotten. And then they waited. Marcus watched from above. His fingers had gone numb. The torch had died. He turned to run, to fetch the others. But his legs did not move. Not out of fear. But out of knowing. This was not a raid. This was not war. This was something else. Below, the Huns knelt. Not in reverence. Not in submission. But in stillness. And when the sun began to rise, slowly, painfully, as if afraid to witness, the river looked gold. Munzuk stepped forward. His boots touched the water's edge. He bent, touched his fingers to the surface, and brought them to his lips. Then he crossed. No sword was drawn. No horn was sounded. The Roman watchtower stood silent, its walls shadowed in morning light. The boy did not look back. Behind him, one by one, the others followed. The Danube did not resist. Marcus watched them go. Not with hatred. Not even with fear. But with the strange ache of watching a story begin, one in which he would have no part. The mist thinned. The birds began to sing again. And somewhere to the east, far beyond what any map could hold, the wind shifted. The boy with the jet around his neck would grow. Would ride. Would bear sons. And one of them, forged from exile and wind and fire, would become the shadow Rome feared, the thunder that split empires, the silence that buried laws. But for now, he was just a boy. Crossing a river. With nothing but the breath of his mother and the weight of stone to guide him. The Danube kept flowing. And the world did not yet know it had changed. But it had. The river would remember. The walls would remember. The silence would remember. Even if men forgot. And far down the banks, where the mist met morning, a falcon rose, wings wide, scream sharp, vanishing into the sun. The old world had blinked. The new one had already opened its eyes, the wind mourned through the black pine forest, long and hollow, like a voice from beneath the earth calling back something it once loved. Snow did not fall, not yet, it simply waited, suspended in the ash-colored sky like held breath. Beneath that heavy silence, a single shape moved, slow and solemn. A boy knelt before a shallow grave. His fingers were red from cold, dirt packed beneath each nail, his knuckles raw and split. Before him, the frozen earth had been torn open with a bone shovel and frostbitten hands. The body laid within was wrapped in wool, stiff with death. It no longer smelled of the man it had been. The winter had stolen even that. The boy's breath came in clouds, pale and uneven. His name, Attila, meant nothing yet. Not to the trees, not to the dead, not even to himself. He was small beneath the pines. Small beneath the sky. His father, Munzuk, lay in the ground before him. Silent now, like the stars. He placed 3 tokens on the chest of the corpse, a flint blade still warm from his palm, a lock of horsehair braided tight, and the raven feather his father had tucked into his saddle after their last hunt together. The feather had once shimmered with oil-black fire. Now it drooped, stiff and grayed by frost. Still, the boy pressed it down with trembling fingers. "So you remember how to fly," he whispered, though no sound escaped his lips. Behind him stood a figure cloaked in bare fur, the outline broad and unmoving, Rua, his father's brother. A man of storms and silence. His face was shadowed by the hood, but his hands were bare, gripping the hilt of a sword not drawn. "Not today. Remember what you bury," Rua said, his voice like gravel in snow. "One day, it will rise in you." Attila did not reply. He did not know how. Grief had not yet formed a language he could speak. He only watched as his uncle stepped forward and dropped a final handful of earth over the tokens, sealing the memory beneath stone and frost. There would be no priest. No song. No coin to carry Munzuk into another world. Only the cry of a raven in the canopy, a single, hoarse note that trembled through the branches like a final breath, and the soft sound of pine needles shifting under unseen weight. This was the ritual of the steppe. No tombs. No temple. Just earth. Just memory. Just wind. Far to the west, Rome slept in firelight. Behind its walls of marble and iron, nobles dined in perfumed chambers, raising cups of honeyed wine to gods carved in stone. They spoke of barbarians, with smiles curled in contempt, as if the cold of the east were nothing more than a page in a ledger. But Rome did not know this forest. Did not feel the teeth of its silence. Did not taste the blood in its snow. The boy stood. His knees cracked, stiff from the cold. Snowflakes began to fall, slowly at first, then faster, swirling like ash around the grave. He did not cry. The tears had frozen long ago. Rua laid a hand on his shoulder. A rare gesture. Almost a prayer. "You are alone now," he said. Attila blinked at the trees. "No," he said. The word surprised them both. The forest seemed to pause, listening. Even the snow fell quieter. He turned, leaving the grave to the frost. His boots broke the crust of old ice, sinking deeper with each step. Behind him, the fire they had built the night before hissed out, swallowed by the wind. Smoke curled into the sky like a soul with no name. The camp was silent when they returned. Rough tents sagged under frost. The horses huffed steam into the morning. A child was coughing behind a curtain of leather and fur, a wet, rattling sound that would likely end in silence. The world was shrinking. Food was thinning. And the old chiefs whispered that their people had strayed too far from the river. That the gods of the land had grown restless. Rua spoke that night to the gathered men, his voice low beside the fire. He did not tell stories. He issued promises. "We ride south come thaw," he said. "There is grain behind the walls. Water in their wells. Gold in their gods." The others nodded. Not with joy. But with the tired, bitter reverence of men who had nothing left to lose. Attila sat outside the firelight, his shadow long and flickering behind him. He held the feather still, pressing it flat between the pages of his mind. He did not yet understand the gravity of Rua's words. But he understood hunger. He understood what it meant to bury your blood and walk away colder than when you began. Later, when the fire burned down to coals, a boy sang. Softly. Off-key. The language was old, a cradle song his mother had sung before sickness hollowed her. The sound curled through the camp like smoke, warm, brief, easily extinguished. Attila listened with eyes wide open. He would not sleep that night. The snow deepened. The trees grew darker. And somewhere beyond them, beyond the frost and the silence and the bones of the forgotten, Rome moved unaware. But the steppe did not forget. The spirit stirred. The wind shifted. And beneath the earth, the feather waited. Time passed, as it always does. In weeks. In hoofbeats. In names. The boy grew. His shoulders broadened. His hands calloused. He learned the sound of leather tightening across bowstrings, the smell of blood warming in fresh snow, the difference between silence that protects and silence that betrays. He rode under Rua's banner, but he carried his own war inside him, quieter, sharper, unseen. Still, the grave remained. Every year, when the frost first came, he returned. Alone. Always alone. He never knelt again. He stood above it now. Not as a son. As a witness. The flint had cracked. The horsehair had rotted. But the feather remained. He did not speak. He did not need to. Some graves do not hold the dead. They hold the future. And far beyond that grave, across rivers, across walls, across the brittle parchment of Roman peace, something stirred. A name unspoken. A fire still waiting. But not for long. The feather, thin and black, trembled in the wind. And for the first time in years, Attila smiled. There are moments when the past sharpens. When grief ceases to mourn and begins to mold. This was such a moment. And though no horn sounded, and no sword struck stone, the world had already begun to change. Not in thunder. But in footsteps. And in the breath of a boy who no longer feared the cold. Smoke curled upward through a hole in the roof, trailing toward a sky that had forgotten how to shine. Inside the great hall, firelight licked the low beams and danced over the rough-hewn bones of beasts long slain. Shadows played across fur-lined cloaks and battered shields. The air was thick, with tallow smoke, sweat, and the sharp sting of iron. Somewhere, from deep within the wooden walls, a wolf's pelt stirred with the draught, like something still alive. They had gathered not to feast, but to remember. And to decide. The chieftains sat in a wide circle, their eyes reflecting both the flame and the future. Beards braided with bone, faces scarred by ice and time. No thrones here, just raw benches and the thump of horn mugs on thick oak. Their voices rose and fell like the wind on the steppe, low, rough, always circling back to war. Above their heads, skulls of wild horses watched silently, as if weighing every word. At the center of the circle sat Bleda, firstborn, falcon-eyed, his broad hands resting on the arms of a chair made from a Roman general's bones. His hair was braided down his back like a warrior's whip. Rings weighed down every finger, gleaming dull with stolen Roman gold. When he spoke, it was without urgency. Each syllable dropped into the silence like an arrow, sharp and deliberate. "We will ride," he said. "But we will not beg." A hush followed. No one questioned him aloud. But eyes moved. Glances passed like sparks. They all knew what lay beyond the rivers, cities with walls, chests of silver, honeyed wine, and priests with jeweled fingers who believed their gods could not bleed. And they knew, too, the rumors. That Attila, the quiet one, the younger, the shadow, had begun to draw eyes in battle. He sat beside Bleda, silent as stone, a hawk carved in flesh. He wore no gold. No ring. Only a plain iron torque at his neck, and a cloak stained from the road. He drank nothing. Ate little. But he listened. Not just to the words spoken, but to the pauses between them. To the tightening of hands, the glances exchanged when Bleda spoke of treaties. Attila's mind moved like a river under ice, slow, unseen, but unstoppable. He remembered too much. He remembered the grave beneath the pine, and the feather that did not rot. He remembered the hunger that wrapped itself around the camp like smoke. He remembered the way the emissaries of Rome looked down at their people, offering coin with one hand, and pity with the other. And he remembered a song. A child's dirge, drifting through the cold after a skirmish, the song of a boy too young to fight, too old to cry. The notes had curled around Attila like a binding. He had followed that sound back to its source. Found the child kneeling over a broken man. No tears, only the song. Attila had spared him. The others did not understand. Bleda mocked the choice. "You show mercy to fire," he said. "And one day it burns you." Attila had not answered then. But now, in the hall, as the fire cracked and the chiefs growled over maps and vengeance, his memory drifted again to that boy. To the song. To the silence that followed. Across the hall, a blade struck wood. A drunk warrior slammed his knife into the table and called for blood, demanded they ride at once, that they burn cities to the ground, take wives and gold, erase Roman names from the tongue of the world. Others cheered. Some laughed. But Bleda only watched Attila. You say nothing, he said. Do you not thirst? Attila met his gaze, steady and unblinking. I do, he said. His voice was low, even. But not for gold. The fire snapped. The wind groaned in the rafters. The laughter died. Attila rose, slow and smooth, as if moved by tides. The fur of his cloak trailed behind him like smoke. Gold rots, he said. Cities fall. But fear remains. He walked to the edge of the fire, staring down into its core, where coals burned hot and white. I want them to remember, he said, quieter now. Not what we took. But what we were. A silence settled over the hall, heavier than any snow. No one spoke. Outside, the wind howled through the teeth of the steppe. Horses shifted in their sleep, stamping the earth as if troubled by dreams. The fire burned lower, casting longer shadows. In one corner of the hall, a child began to sing. Not loudly. A dirge. A melody so thin it might have been breath. It threaded its way through the smoke, curling around the ears of men who had not wept in years. Some turned their heads. Others closed their eyes. Attila did not move. His face remained fixed, but his jaw tensed, just slightly. And in that moment, without sword or oath, something shifted. Not in the room. In the world. It was not victory. Not yet. But it was the breath before the blade falls. The feather before the storm. And it would be remembered. Outside, the night deepened. A frost settled across the plains. The stars emerged like scars on the skin of the sky. Inside the hall, the fire burned to embers. And one by one, the men fell silent. Not from fear. From knowing. Attila had not made a claim. But they had heard it. And far to the south, beyond rivers and borders and altars of stone, Rome turned in its sleep, unknowing. But not untouched. Something had begun. And soon, the silence would give way to hoofbeats that a raven screamed once in the dark, then was silent. Its wings cut across the sky like a blade, vanishing behind clouds the color of old bone. Below, torches hissed in the rain, wavering like dying stars. Water ran in thin, bitter streams down the stone faces of men who did not speak. Their boots sank into the mud, deep, slow, as if the earth itself was trying to pull them under. At the center of the field stood a single wooden post, blackened with smoke. Not a gallows. Not yet. Just a symbol. A place where silence would be broken, and lines redrawn. The Roman envoy had arrived at dusk. Cloaked in crimson wool, his fingers heavy with rings, his eyes darting behind a veil of practiced confidence. He smelled of oil, parchment, and fear masked as diplomacy. They had sent him with gifts, a small casket of silver, 3 bolts of dyed silk, and 2 glass phials of myrrh, as if incense could tame hunger, as if wealth could cover the sound of hooves approaching from the north. He offered words, many of them. Long, polished, dripping with caution and praise. He called Attila a noble leader, a guardian of peace, a servant of the divine sky. Attila said nothing. The fire crackled behind him. Wolves howled beyond the hills. The envoy's voice wavered once when he tried to pronounce the word Tingri. He bowed lower after that, his neck long and pale in the torchlight. Attila sat beneath a tattered canopy, arms crossed, his brow shadowed beneath a fur-lined hood. Rain tapped gently on his shoulders but did not soak him. He had not moved since the envoy began speaking. His face was unreadable, not cold, but carved. Behind him stood his brother. Bleda. Taller, broader, louder. His laughter was sudden and cutting. Is this what Rome sends? He asked. A man with perfume and apologies. The envoy flushed. We bring gifts in good faith, he said. Faith? Bleda echoed, stepping forward. His boot splashed through a puddle, and for a moment the fire behind him reflected red in the water. "Tell me, Roman, when did you begin to believe in faith?" Silence. Attila raised one hand. Not to strike. Not to command. Just to pause. Bleda stopped. Attila stood, slow and deliberate. His cloak clung to him like smoke. He stepped forward, past the envoy, past the fire, past the silver that now looked dull in the mud. He walked to the post. The envoy turned to follow him, but Attila did not look back. He touched the wood, blackened and splintered, the rain glistening on its surface. He traced a mark with his fingertip, the remnant of a brand once burned into the wood by an empire long forgotten. Then he spoke. "Rome," he said, the name falling from his lips like ash, "builds walls around promises. And when the walls rot, the promise is buried." The wind shifted. Smoke blew sideways. The flames shuddered. Attila turned. "You ask for peace," he said. "But peace is not a coin. It is not a trade." He walked toward the envoy, slowly, each step sinking slightly in the mud. "You offer silver," he said. "But my people cannot eat silver. You offer silk, but it does not keep us warm. You offer words." He stopped, inches from the Roman's face. "I do not want your words." The envoy swallowed. His eyes flicked toward the others, but no help came. Attila leaned closer. "I want your fear," he whispered. Then he turned and walked away. Bleda laughed again, deep and cruel, clapping his hands once. The envoy stood frozen. The meeting was over. The torches were extinguished one by one. And the rain did not stop. That night, under the broken sky, the camp moved like a low storm cloud over the hills. Hooves churned the soaked grass, and carts rattled with stolen iron and raw grain. The dogs barked without reason. The children were silent. In his tent, Attila sat before a small fire, sharpening a blade older than he was. He worked slowly, methodically, his breath calm. Sparks leapt from stone to steel, dancing in the dark. Bleda stormed in without knocking. His cloak was soaked. His cheeks flushed from wine. "We should have killed him," he growled. "Let the others see what mercy earns." Attila did not look up. "No," he said. Bleda stepped closer. "You think they will fear you because you spared him?" Attila paused. The blade rested flat in his palm. "No," he said again. "They will fear me because they cannot understand me." He set the blade down. "Rome has a language," he murmured. "And I refuse to speak it." Bleda said nothing. Eventually, he left. And Attila remained. The fire burned low. The steel cooled in his hands. And far outside, across mountains and forests and rivers swollen with spring thaw, the empire stirred, uneasy. They did not know yet. But they would. Not by letter. Not by treaty. By the sound of hooves in the dark. By the breath of wind before the torch goes out. By the silence of men who choose no crown but carve their name into the bones of the world. In the morning, the casket of silver was gone. Left in its place, buried upright beside the envoy's camp, was the post, the same charred wood, now marked with a fresh brand. A falcon. Wings open. Eyes forward. No inscription. No threat. Just a symbol. And a message no Roman could misread. The next emissary would not be spared. And peace, like smoke in the rain, had already vanished. The bells of Margus rang once, not in celebration, not in mourning, but in warning. The sound echoed across the riverbank, trembling through stone and water like a ripple before the storm. Then silence returned, thick and uneasy. The city held its breath. At the gate, a lone figure rode forward. His cloak dragged mud, soaked dark by the thawing earth. His boots bore the stain of long marches, and his eyes held no question. They had been sent to speak, yes, but they had come to listen. Not to words, but to the tremor in the hands of Roman guards. To the smell of panic buried beneath rose water and incense. To the way silence had begun to replace pride on the frontier. Attila sat unmoved. His mount, cold, dark and silent, shifted beneath him like a wave not yet broken. Behind him, a sea of hooves and steel and breathless wind waited. No banners. No trumpets. Just presence, terrible, wordless, immense. They had come not for spectacle, but for memory. The Bishop of Margus had not emerged. He had promised sanctuary, promised parley, promised peace with the ink of desperation. But he did not come. And in his place, the gates creaked open just wide enough for a rider to slip through, bearing tokens and excuses. Attila said nothing. The rider dismounted. Sweat dripped from his brow though the wind was cold. He offered a golden cross, its corners chipped, its chain already tarnishing. For peace, the man said, bowing low. Attila took the cross in his palm and looked at it, not as a gift, but as a question. What is peace when it is born of betrayal? Behind him, a standard-bearer rode forward, silent, and planted the iron rod of the Hun into the ground. The banner unfurled, dark red, stitched with black thread in the shape of a will broken at one spoke. Not conquest. Not yet. But warning. In the years before, Rome had paid for silence. Silver by the chestful. Titles by the dozen. They called Attila, ally, negotiator, diplomatic guest. They gave him keys to cities they swore were eternal. They bowed, and they bargained. But the gold came slower each year. And with it, the lies grew thicker. The Bishop of Margus had crossed a river not meant to be crossed. He had desecrated the tombs of Hunnic dead, tombs that lay hidden in Roman soil, secret and sacred. He had plundered the graves, melted down the talismans, and sold the bones to traders who spoke 3 languages but knew no reverence. All of it, Rome denied. All of it, Attila remembered. He turned the cross in his hand again. Its weight meant nothing now. He dropped it into the mud. It did not sink. It stared upward, like an eye. He spoke, not to the envoy, not to the wind, but to the land beneath them. The dead do not forget, he said. Then he turned and rode away. The gates closed again. And Margus returned to its prayers. But prayers do not drown hoofbeats. Within days, the sky changed. Storms did not come, but the air grew heavy, the kind of weight that presses down on the chest before violence. Villagers fled before they were told. Cattle were herded southward, away from the river. Monks began to burn their own manuscripts, afraid of what would be done to words not sanctioned by Rome. And then the siege began. Not with fire. Not with ladders. But with patience. The Huns circled the city like wolves circling an injured stag. They made no campfires, sang no war songs. They simply waited. They let the silence fray the nerves of men behind stone. Attila did not order attack. He ordered watching. For days, no assault came. Just the hum of dread, the sound of walls settling, and the quiet whisper of a people unraveling. Then, one morning, the gates opened. Not by soldiers. By a priest. He carried a book. His hands trembled. His eyes were red from sleepless nights. We were wrong, he whispered. Behind him, the city trembled. Attila did not dismount. He looked down at the man and said only, "You were late." And the horsemen surged forward. No horn. No cry. Just a wave of hooves and wind and vengeance. They did not sack Margus, they cleansed it. Street by street, stone by stone, they moved with the silence of retribution. They spared few, and they spoke less. The bishop was found in the cathedral, wrapped in velvet, mouth full of ash. Some said he took poison. Others said he tried to bribe the sky. By nightfall, the city was smoke. Its bells melted. Its crosses blackened. Its silence complete. And still, Attila said nothing. He stood atop the highest point, the citadel wall, now crumbling, and watched as the river turned red in places. Then he removed his glove and pressed his palm to the broken parapet. "This is not conquest," he murmured, "this is memory." He did not raise a banner. There was no need. The message was ash and bone. And beyond Margus, other cities stirred. Aquileia. Sirmium. Nisus. They saw the smoke. They heard the name. And they began to tremble. The Huns rode on. Not fast, but sure. They did not loot. They did not waste. They did not explain. Because fear travels faster than fire. And Attila had learned long ago, from graves, from silence, from the empty promises of gold, that power was not taken. It was remembered. At dusk, a boy returned to the ruins of Margus. He walked alone, barefoot in the mud. He had hidden in a barrel when the gates fell. Now, he stepped through the ash. He found the cross Attila had dropped. Still there. Still watching. He picked it up. Held it in both hands. And cried. Not because of what had come. But because something in him knew, it wasn't over. The sky above the river was the color of steel, flat, cold, and waiting. It did not weep. It did not move. It watched. Below, the Danube stood swollen and gray, its surface broken only by ice drifting like slow-moving ghosts. A single wooden bridge stretched across it, built not by the Huns, but by trembling Roman hands, an offering disguised as compromise. The wind carried the scent of burnt grain and pine ash, the remnants of a town that no longer had a name. Attila stood at the center of the bridge, unmoving, as if he had been carved from the same wood beneath him. Behind him stretched the vast silence of his army, thousands of riders cloaked in wolfskin and blood memory, their faces veiled in dust. They did not chant. They did not cheer. They waited. Ahead, across the bridge, the emissaries of the Eastern Empire stood in pale robes and thicker fear. They had brought scrolls, seals, and signatures. Their horses had golden saddles, their guards polished breastplates. They smelled of cloves and desperation. But it was not the envoys who spoke first. It was the priest. Old, hunched, draped in the faded robes of Constantinople, he stepped forward with shaking hands wrapped around a book too heavy for his frame. His voice broke the frost-bound silence. "You have crossed where none should cross," he said. "Rome has named you scourge, but still, she offers peace." The word peace echoed, thin and hollow over the river. Attila said nothing. His eyes tracked the priest's every word, but he gave no nod, no twitch, no response. The priest tried again. "Gold will be paid," he continued. "Triple the tribute. Cities restored. Borders redrawn." A parchment was lifted. A signature already inked. One of the envoys stepped forward to present it. His hands were clean, his rings heavy. "This is the Treaty of Anatolius," he said. "Rome's finest offering." Still, Attila did not move. His breath, when it came, did not mist. It was too cold. When he finally spoke, it was so softly that the wind had to carry it forward. "Do you know the name of my horse?" The envoy blinked. I do not." Attila touched the animal's mane, dark and thick like coiled storm. "This horse," he said, "was born on the night my brother was buried. It never faltered. Not in flood, not in famine. It has never known a Roman road." He stepped closer. "I name it Silence." The emissaries looked at one another, unsure whether this was riddle or threat. It walks through borders as if they were smoke, Attila whispered. Because no border is real unless blood says so. He turned his gaze to the parchment. What is a treaty written by trembling hands? No answer. What is peace offered by those who would poison graves? No answer. Give me no words, he said. I will take memory. He stepped forward, past the priest, past the guards, past the envoy with the treaty. One man flinched. Another dropped the scroll. Attila looked up, at the sun behind the clouds, pale and bloodless. Today, I cross, he said. And the world shifted. Behind him, thousands of hooves stirred. Slowly. Not like a charge, but a tide coming in. Unstoppable, patient, wide. They did not storm Constantinople. Not yet. Instead, they bled across Thrace, filling its fields with shadow. Cities once bustling with incense and argument now stood hollow. Gates swung in the wind. Bell towers were silent. Some villages set their own granaries alight before the horsemen arrived, choosing ash over humiliation. In one town, they found the statue of a Roman emperor, its face already defaced by fleeing hands. Attila watched as a child, barefoot and mute, tried to carry a loaf of bread wrapped in a burial cloth. The bread was moldy. The cloth still smelled of the grave. He took neither. But he left a feather in the ruins. A black one. Oiled against rain. Not a threat. A marker. Because fear has a language. And it begins with symbols. The Huns didn't need to burn every city. They needed to be imagined in every shadow. In Adrianople, a Roman commander surrendered without seeing a single rider. He had heard stories, of men trampled in their sleep, of infants who went quiet at the tremble of hooves. Of treaties signed with ink but answered with fire. In the nights that followed, even the trees whispered his name. Attila. Not shouted. Whispered. Like a prayer. Or a curse. And yet, in the heart of the Eastern Empire, the court still tried to dress its fear in silk. They gathered again to send another message, another gift. A chest of Byzantine gold, hand-shaped into effigies of peace doves and angels. A page boy was sent to carry it, his cheeks painted, his fingers ink-stained with the names of saints. When the chest arrived, Attila opened it. He said nothing. He lifted one gold dove, inspected its wings. Then crushed it in one hand. Melted it in fire. And forged it into a horseshoe. Spring came late that year. Or maybe it never came at all. The fields of the Balkans remained grey and wet, their furrows soaked not with rain, but with the meltwater of grief. Roman roads cracked beneath the weight of carts that carried nothing, only empty barrels and prayer. And still the Huns advanced, slowly, without mercy. Attila rode always at the front. Not to lead. To watch. He did not crave the glory his enemies imagined. He craved something simpler. Recognition. That the world they had drawn in ink was flawed. That the silence they ignored had a voice. And it now spoke through him. One evening, at the edge of a burned village, he dismounted and stood alone beneath a dead tree. Crows gathered above. The wind stirred the hem of his cloak. Beneath his feet lay the ruins of a temple, marble columns snapped like reeds. He reached down and brushed ash from a shattered floor tile. Beneath it, carved into the stone, was a word. Pax. Peace. He stared at it. Then let the tile fall. And walked on. Because for Attila, peace was not something written. It was something that came after fear had been heard. And he had not finished speaking. A field of bones lay quiet beneath a soft rain, glistening faintly beneath the waning moon. There were no banners, no cries, no drums to mark the passing of an age, only the slow hiss of water on iron, and the faint rustle of reeds, heavy with dew. In the darkness, The wind moved gently over forgotten helmets and shattered wheels, whispering names no longer spoken aloud. Somewhere near the Tisza River, in the heart of the great Hungarian plain, a wooden tent flapped in the wind. It was shaped not like a palace, but like a memory, round, low, fur-lined. Inside, a single torch crackled in silence, the smoke curling like prayer toward a roof lashed from deer hide and sinew. On a fur mat, with a goblet near his hand and silence gathered at his feet, Attila the Hun lay dead. Not in battle. Not by blade. But by blood. Some say his nose bled in the night, unseen, unstaunched, drowning him in silence. Others say he was murdered, by his bride, by his guards, by the empire. A poison slipped into celebration. A final betrayal. The stories circle like vultures. But none of them matter now. Because the man they once called the Scourge of God had fallen not on the battlefield, but in his wedding chamber. And the earth did not thunder. The sky did not shatter. Only the candle beside him flickered once, then went out. Morning did not come quickly. It crawled in gray and thin, brushing its pale hand across the edges of tents and arrows and the eyes of horses who did not yet understand their master was gone. A dog howled in the distance, sharp, brief, hollow. And when the word finally came, Attila is dead, it passed from lips to ears like blasphemy. Some refused to believe it. Others fell to their knees. But all were silent. For days, the Hunnic camp became a shrine. No one spoke above a whisper. No one raised steel. 1,000 war bands stood frozen, not in grief alone, but in uncertainty. The man who had united them, who had broken Rome and bound the wild peoples of the steppe beneath one banner, was now a still body wrapped in wolfskin. His sons gathered in the shadow of his yurt. Elek. Dengizik. Ernak. Each with fire in their eyes, each with a different version of the dream their father had built. The same blood ran through their veins, but blood is not always enough. Beneath their words were swords. And behind their oaths, there was hunger. Elek, the eldest, claimed the legacy by age and oath. I was at his right hand when he entered Rome's gates, he said. The empire feared me as they feared him. Dengizik scoffed. They feared him. You they pitied. Ernak, the youngest, said little. But his eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. None of them noticed the slow unraveling. Not yet. But in the forests beyond the plains, the vassal tribes stirred. The Gepids. The Ostrogoths. The Rugii. The very people Attila had bent into allies now saw the threadbare seams of his empire, stitched together by awe and iron, now loosening, now open to the wind. The burial was unlike any Rome had known. There was no marble, no pyre, no coin for the ferryman. Attila was buried beneath the earth he had once scorched. His warriors slaughtered 1,000 horses in his name, their blood soaking the grassland in crimson arcs. 3 coffins were forged, one of iron, one of silver, and one of gold. They placed his body in all 3, sealing them with chants spoken in a tongue older than empire. And then, in darkness, a procession rode out, silent, swift, secret. They buried him in a hidden grave, somewhere unknown, so no man might disturb him. And those who buried him were killed. All of them. Because kings may die. But legends must vanish. Only then can they become eternal. In the months that followed, the silence broke. The unity shattered. Elek declared himself king, but the other chieftains balked. The tribes who had once obeyed Attila's shadow now questioned his son's flesh. Battles broke out. Brother turned on brother. And slowly, the great Hunnic tide that had once pressed against the heart of Rome receded, not with fire, but with fracture. At the Battle of Nidao, the tribes rose. Elek rode with the Huns, his banner still heavy with his father's symbol, the broken wheel. But the Gepids stood against him. And that day, the river ran red. Elek fell. Dengizic and Ernak scattered, taking with them only fragments, shards of what Attila had forged. No city would rise to mark their rule. No coins would carry their names. And the Huns, as a unified force, dissolved. Not vanished. But scattered. Like ash. Like whispers. And yet, even as the empire of Attila fell to memory, the fear remained. Roman mothers still warned their children, centuries later, that if they did not sleep, Attila would come in the night. Monks copied his name in the margins of chronicles, inked in red like blood. And somewhere, deep beneath the plains of Pannonia, a coffin of iron waits, beneath river, beneath root, beneath time. The man who once made emperors weep in their own halls, now sleeps in dirt. But his legend walks. Not because he built cities. Not because he left laws. But because he made the world tremble. And for a moment in time, when the wind blew hard across the Danube, all of Rome believed the end had come. Now only silence remains. But even silence remembers.